How are we doing today? I want to take some time and talk a little bit about ego because I think there are a lot of misperceptions and connotations related to ego that aren't necessarily what we mean when we talk about ego in a spiritual context. So I went to dictionary.com, I looked up the word ego. First definition is something like the I that interacts with the external world. Okay. Second is a psychological definition, psychiatric style. Third was, I believe, something along the lines of egotistical maniacs. Fourth was caring about appearance. When we talk about ego, it's not really any of them, it's essentially all of them. And so here's how I think about the ego. The ego is the small part inside of each of us that views itself as separate. And I call it small in contrast to the soul, which is infinite. The ego is impermanent. The soul is permanent. So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about there being two deaths that happen to every human. The first death is the death of the ego, and then the second death is the death of the physical body. And the argument that really resonated with me when I first heard about this was the context, and I don't remember the source. The context was the longer you let the ego run its programs and get entrenched into stories, into patterns, into cycles, the harder it is to break those patterns, stories, and cycles. And so doing it when you're young is much easier than when you're older. The ego typically is reasonably formed by the age of 7, give or take. And it is that part of you that lives in constant fear because it feels inferior, because it knows it's not permanent. The soul goes on to other things after death. The ego doesn't. The ego stays here. It is a construct of this physical reality and does not have an existence outside of it. So it spends a lot of time trying to understand separation and why it's different or why you're different than other people. And so it builds a lot of stories around why things are happening to you and who did this to me and separation and disconnectedness from source, from spirit. And most people on the planet, I would argue, are running on ego programs. They have very little connection to their higher self, and the ego dominates their life. And on sort of an unconscious or subconscious basis, reality is formed by the ego. The ego is dominating your life. So if you want to take over control of your destiny, one of the first things you need to do is release the ego. People will talk about killing the ego. I don't think that's quite right. I used to use that phraseology myself. I think it's more about seeing it, accepting it, and being able to discern when it's telling you a story that isn't true or a story that isn't your reality. So a typical occurrence along these lines is the ego wants to keep us trapped in the same things because the same hell is safer than the potential for a worse hell or a better hell or heaven even. So it would rather keep you trapped, the ego would rather keep you trapped in existing patterns than to actually ascend out of those patterns. And so it digs in hard when you try to break it. So breaking it, I don't think is the right way to approach it. The right way to approach it is to give it love, to give it acceptance, to say, thank you for protecting me all these years. What a wonderful service. How brave this part of me is, and shower it with love. It's the best way to handle the ego. And I'm going to have to talk a lot more about this in future videos, because there is so much here to unpack.